Guys, I do not think the world rates us right now. But I'm going to remain unbiased for the sake of this news report. Cue the theme song. Good morning to you and welcome to another episode of In Other Matters, Korea edition, Africa edition, with me, your host, Barbara. And if you don't know who Corey is, here's a quick breakdown.
Coronavirus! 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 It is real! Coronavirus! It is real!
So if you haven't already deduced, today we're going to be doing a run through on how the African continent is dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. And we are going to be asking questions because if we don't do it, who will? Now, Africa has around 500,000 cases out of 12 million cases. That's about 4%, and yet the World Bank is loaning us tens of millions of dollars. The European Union has pledged 15 million euros to vulnerable countries, and we all know who the vulnerable countries are. Even China is making donations. Guys, China. Now I know what you might be thinking. Oh, the world is coming together. Here's what I'm thinking. This is fishy. Let me illustrate this for you guys. You're two people walking down the street. The other guy is walking slightly ahead of you and you're both just really minding your own business. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the person in front of you gets jumped. Someone just jumped out of a bush and started beating them up. Now, obviously, you're there like, whoa. The next thing you know, the attacker is coming for you, but to your surprise, he just kicks you really hard in the leg, like in the shin. So it hurts a lot, and there may be some internal bleeding, maybe your leg is broken, we don't know yet. Time will tell. Now here's the crazy part. The guy in front of you who just got jumped is now at your leg like, oh my gosh, this is so serious, let me help you. Now what I forgot to mention is that you owe this guy money. Like a lot of money. Now I don't know about you guys, but if I saw this guy at my feet, me and my broken leg would have packed our bags and ran. This just goes to illustrate how the countries most affected by the coronavirus pandemic also seem to be the most active in contributing financial aid to developing countries. Dude, you're injured worse than me. I am limping. You are on the floor. And you're still trying to sneak in alone. No, honey. Focus on your own project. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not trying to discourage the challenges that African countries have, but we do not need more loans, especially because it took so many deliberations and procedures to get China to even consider debt relief. Anyway, there are several reasons as to why Africa's coronavirus rates are so low. One of the main reasons, especially emphasized by Western journalists, is our woefully low testing rates. However, I have a few other reasons that make us look less like a pity party, including low population density, experience with epidemics, and less travel. However, most of these reasons don't hold water because there simply isn't enough evidence to prove them. And it makes sense. One might say, we have more important issues in which to be directing our research efforts right now. I mean, this is a pandemic. Anyways, here's what I found on the Daily Maverick and the African Report. Number 1, low temperature climates. Coronavirus seems to be more prevalent in countries with colder climates, specifically in the winter months. In Africa, we have direct sunlight, higher temperatures, less humidity, and an overall drier environment. There are several unpublished studies that hint towards lower temperatures and higher coronavirus incidence rates. However, there isn't enough research available and evidence to prove that this is true. So what I can tell you is that the coronavirus is coated with an oily layer, and what we know about oil is that it upholds its integrity in lower temperatures and is more likely to disintegrate in higher temperatures. We can therefore assume that with lower temperatures, the coronavirus can live for longer because the conditions are more favorable. But until we have any solid evidence to prove this is just a theory. Number 2, younger population. Sub-Saharan Africa has an approximately 3% population of individuals over the age of 65. This is in comparison to European countries such as Italy, which had a 23% population of individuals over 65. Number 3 is a more interesting and slightly controversial one, is the BCG vaccine. This vaccination was introduced to the UK in 1953 and was administered to children around the ages of 14 in order to provide immunity against tuberculosis. They stopped issuing this vaccine in 2005 when there were signs that the incidence rates were steadily decreasing. However, the issuing of this vaccine in Africa began in the 1970s. Doctors have noticed a trend between countries that issue the BCG vaccine and coronavirus incidence rates, and it's that the incidence rates are just much lower. Now, the reason for this I cannot tell you simply because Google doesn't know the answer either. But it does pose an important question. Does the BCG vaccine provide secondary protective properties against the coronavirus? And if so, what are we going to do about it? Speaking of initiatives, we're moving on to Madagascar and the herbal tonic which goes by the name COVID Organics. Firstly, what is it? Well, this herbal tonic is a drink comprising of several different herbs including Artemisia annua, which is commonly known as sweet wormwood. A quick history on the plant, Artemisia annua L has been used for over 2,000 years in China as treatment for several illnesses. It was introduced to the rest of the world in the 1970s specifically for its anti-malarial properties. The Madagascar Institute of Applied Research and the National Pharmacology's Research Center joined forces to conduct studies and set up a research protocol on this plant already known for its anti-malarial properties. Now, once the president of Madagascar, Andry Rajoelina, launched the tonic, there was an immediate objection by the World Health Organization, the WHO. They asked for clinical trials and evidence as Madagascar had claimed that not only could this tonic be used as a preventative measure, but also as a cure. And indeed, Madagascar is yet to produce any evidence from clinical trials, but keep in mind that the protocol for herbal medicines differs from that of conventional drugs. One of the main reasons for this being that conventional drugs are just so much more toxic for our bodies than herbal medicine. Now let me give you the 411 because claiming that you found a cure for the coronavirus is kind of a big deal. In an interview with France 24, President Rajoelina stated that they had carried out clinical observations in line with the WHO recommendations and that they fully complied with the universally recognized standards of ethics, clinical research, and studies. At the time of launching this tonic, Madagascar had 0 coronavirus-related deaths. To date, they have 37. Now, beyond the clinical trials and coronavirus, many believe that the WHO's response to this tonic is representative of the world's views on African capabilities. For many years, African countries have proven to be dependent on foreign aid. Now that we're taking matters into our own hands, the response has been far from positive, especially because our efforts go down the path of alternative medicine, something most Western institutions don't consider a priority. So, question time. How developed are the WHO's protocols on alternative medicine, and are they really beneficial to non-Western approaches on healthcare? Now that we've passively attacked them, the WHO does seem to be making an effort to dissipate the perception that they are the enemy. Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, the Regional Director of Africa for the WHO, tweeted that 70 traditional medicine experts from countries across Africa held a virtual meeting with the WHO on the role of traditional medicine in the COVID-19 response, and that they unanimously agreed that the clinical trials must be conducted for all medicines in the region without exception. Okay, so I found another article by the Medical Brief that basically discusses how the WHO and the Africa CDC have offered to partner with Madagascar to test COVID Organics in a proper medical trial. I will leave that link in my description below and you guys can read it and let me know what you think. Back to the video. And honestly, my first response was to give them a round of applause. Then I realized this is what's supposed to be happening. In fact, it's about time. I mean, this is a pandemic. So what are your thoughts on this? And have you heard of any other African countries working towards a COVID-19 cure? Let me know. While Madagascar is trying to prove their credibility, Tanzanian President Magufuli has claimed that coronavirus is no more. He has claimed that the coronavirus cases are declining and therefore borders have opened and schools and universities have been open since the 1st of June. President Magufuli even declared 3 days of Thanksgiving to officiate the end of coronavirus in Tanzania. Now, as I've said before, whenever things are too good to be true, they usually are. Tanzania has not released any official records regarding the coronavirus since the 29th of April. But everybody knows that, so catch this. In early May, however, President Magufuli stated that these testing kits were faulty after a papaya, a quail, and a goat tested positive using these kits. Tanzania received testing kits from the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention along with the Jack Ma Foundation. And of course the accused organizations denied the allegations. So who do we believe? Cue the suspenseful music. In an interview with the New Humanitarian, a health consultant from Tanzania stated that everything that is related to corona is now in the central government's hands and that there's tremendous political pressure coming from the president's office to control all of this. In addition to this, footage that claims to be secret burials of people that have died of COVID-19 are allegedly circling social media. The general population has expressed an atmosphere of fear and distrust in their state. Now I know what you guys are thinking. Everything I just said had conspiracy theory vibes written all over it. And yet I'm just here to give you the facts. It's very clear that President Magufuli's unconventional response to the COVID-19 pandemic has allowed the media to portray him as the villain. His response to this is that he's focused on the country's economy. What makes Tanzania the exception? Now hold on to your purses, people, because the tea is about to get hot. No, the tea is already boiling. It's just about to be served. When it comes to the economy and finance, Africa has a slightly different relationship to the rest of the world, as we have the catch-22 of being a resource-rich country, but also a former captive of colonialism that has led us to chronic poverty. This poverty is what allows for resource exploitation that is now permitted in various forms of institutional neo-colonialism. Africa is already in immense debt due to loans from the World Bank and Western institutions. Even now, in a pandemic, they are still trying to lend us a hand by giving us more loans. Now, interest or no interest, these loans are going to be more of a detriment than a benefit to African countries, especially because once the pandemic is over, most countries worldwide will either have really weak economies or be going into a recession. Having newly acquired debt only makes recovery harder. This is all in comparison to European countries which have joined forces to put together rescue packages for other European countries which have been adversely affected by the effects of this pandemic. Now one might respond by saying, Barbara, these are still loans. And yes, they are still loans. However, the money is circulating amongst themselves. In African countries, the money generated during and after the pandemic will be used to repay loans to countries outside of Africa. We are literally losing our money and resources on a daily basis. This makes one think, well then let's just not take loans. Surely we can figure something out amongst ourselves. Except in 2005, when Malawi was recovering from severe food shortages, they were advised to do the following. And stay with me now. Accept loans and aid from the World Bank and countries like the US and use the money to grow cash crops for export, then use the foreign exchange earnings to import food. What? When the Malawi government decided not to rely on financial aid but rather to supply their farmers with subsidized maize seeds and fertilizers, international sanctions led by the US were placed against them. Keeping in mind that the US was spending billions of dollars yearly to subsidize their own cotton farmers, which was directly undercutting the efforts of African farmers. So coming back to the coronavirus pandemic, President Magufuli's decision not to disclose the country's statistics simply deprives the West of another reason as to why we need their financial aid. Now, these types of stories are not sensational or emotive, so they probably won't make any headlines, and only a few social scientists and economists will be able to support these claims with evidence. And before you call me crazy or money hungry, I do believe that leaders have a very serious and important responsibility when it comes to being transparent with their citizens. A country is nothing without its people. I just wanted to show you guys the other side of the coin, the side that victimizes Africans whenever they choose not to take the Western recommendation. And now, for the final part of the show, I present to you another new segment I like to call Rapid Fire Headlines that will leave you with some questions. It's pretty self-explanatory, so let's just get into it. Despite the exponential increase in coronavirus cases over the past weeks, South African students are gradually being sent back to school. In the past 4 months, Kenya has reported over 4,000 teen pregnancy cases. Kenya has started a radio broadcasting channel for Class 8 and Form 4 students who do not have access to the internet to continue with their remote learning. However, some of these children do not have access to textbooks to follow along, and furthermore, students will only be returning to school in 2021. COVID-19 may be jeopardizing Angola's efforts to rebuild its declining oil production. The University of Witwatersrand has partnered with the University of Oxford to test a potential coronavirus vaccine. In South Africa, the study is being funded by the South African Medical Research Council and a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, while the University of Oxford is providing the vaccine at no cost. I'm just going to leave this here. Despite the coronavirus's dent on the economy, 6 African countries are currently among the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world. Kenya, supported by the African Union, gathered 129 votes to secure a seat on the United Nations Security Council from 2021. Burundi elections amidst the coronavirus pandemic usher the first democratic transfer of power in 58 years. This brings me to the end of this episode of In Other Matters Season 1, Episode 2, Kori Edition, Africa Edition. I am your lead and only anchor, telling you all to keep safe and keep reading. I've left all the resources that I used to do the research for this video in the description below, so feel free to go read, ask questions, criticize, discuss it with your peers, and let's just grow, guys. Let's grow. Which have been adversely. In African countries, all the revenue